Hello, 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 welcome back to the Saba show, and today we've got round 8 predictions. I'm going to try be more short and sharp with these, so without further ado, let's get into it. First fixture of the weekend is on Friday night at 7:30. Port taking on the Dogs. The Dogs won a game they needed to win by 32 points, and the Power snuck in a 1-point victory in Cairns in what was a very, very bad game of football. Port Adelaide, I'm going to say this with regards to St Kilda as well. You cannot base where they're at on that game alone, because it was just shocking. I mean, the conditions were poor. The ground was chopped up. Both teams didn't kick more than 5 goals on the evening. So, bit of a tough one to gauge. The Bulldogs needed to get back to winning ways. They did the job here. This one's at the Adelaide Oval, and in past seasons, you would have found it very difficult to go past the Power. But I just think that game was misleading and could, it's a bit of false hope for Port fans, I do believe. So I'm going to say the Bulldogs win. The Power, I do believe, are getting a few reinforcements back. I think Charlie Dixon is pretty close. But I don't think they'll get him back this week. Bulldogs to get up. I don't know what the conditions are going to be like, but I just think too much firepower for the Dogs, and previous form would suggest. Other Friday night game, and the Dockers just keep on proving me wrong. They're 6-1. They beat the Cats in Geelong last week. I thought there was going to be a game that they were going to give in, and, well, it did not happen last week. Very, very mature performance by the Dockers. Their role players keep on delivering. They're getting COVID or players out due to COVID protocols, and it is not phasing them one bit. North Melbourne last week slumped to 1-6, lost to Carlton by about 8 goals. Never looked like they were in the contest after half-time. And it just gets from bad to worse for North. Let's be honest, it happens every single year, and it's happened again. This one is a no-brainer. Fremantle to win at home. They're tough as it is, or they were tough as it is in previous seasons at home. But look, this time round, I don't think North really stand a chance. I think the Dockers will do an absolute number. We go to the Saturday afternoon fixtures. It is the Tigers taking on the Pies, and the Tigers flogged a hapless West Coast away from home by 109 points, and the Pies, should I say, picked up the 4 points against Gold Coast. Mind you, it was not as convincing as some would think. Their backline looked a bit vulnerable at times. They conceded 90 points in a win, so that is a little area of worry for Collingwood. Richmond, I mean, as I said, they got back to winning ways, but they needed to do this as well. Very similar situation of the Bulldogs. If they slump to 2-5, it looks much worse than 3-4, obviously. But this win boosted them percentage-wise, confidence-wise, everything. I think this is going to be a really tight game. I'm going to back the Pies, I think, away from home. Well, it's not away from home, it's at the home of football. But look, I just think they're too strong. Every single time I back Richmond in, they decide to have a stinker of a game. So I'm going to predict the Pies win. I am very conscious of the fact that they are a young side still. It's very difficult to put them in the old or the young category. They're somewhere in the middle. They've got a lot of experience, but there's a lot of holes given that they have young players and they're very prone to mistakes. So I think the Pies will win. I think the Tigers will give them a run for their money, and I would not be surprised if the Tigers get up themselves. Other game on Saturday afternoon, Sydney taking on the Suns. The Swans are 5-2, lost last week to a Brisbane side that is not messing around, and the Suns, as I just said, lost by 25. Actually played a pretty good brand of football. Were always like just one arm's length away from taking the lead. Levi Casbolt had a really good game. Took Miller had probably one of his better performances in the year, but all that was wasted. The Swannies, that was always going to be a really, really interesting game to watch, in the sense that these two could be finals opponents come season's end. And Brisbane, stood up in a really high-pressure situation away from home. The Swans will be disappointed that they let that one get away, because they had a couple opportunities to get back into the contest. They went on a run themselves and then gave it all away, and all their hard work was undone when their backline basically gave in and the floodgates opened. So look, I think the Swans will win this one at home. They will bounce back. The Suns they've had a pretty tough draw to start the year. They've picked up a couple wins, but obviously the likes of West Coast and Carlton. Carlton are travelling well, as I would know, but the Eagles are well off it. So that is probably a given that you win that game. So Swans to win, probably by a fair portion, 5-6 goals, I reckon, is probably a reasonable prediction. Saturday twilight is GWS taking on Geelong at the 4:35 time slot in Canberra. And look, Giants got back to winning ways after they had been in a bit of a slump. A win was overdue, and they got it against the Crows, who, I mean, it's very easy to completely brush over the fact that they are still a really young team and basically have a lot of work to do against, going up against those top sides and running with them. The Cats would be very, very upset that they lost one that got away. To be honest, they started extremely well, kicked 5 goals, and then for the next 2 quarters were held to 1 goal. So that's probably the blueprint. You've got to find ways to stop Hawkins and Cameron, and you've got their forward line basically covered, because the small forwards couldn't really function. They usually thrive when the key forwards are dragging all the attention to them. And even when that happened last week, they still weren't able to, put up the goals on the scoreboard, basically. And it wasn't enough, only the 10 goals last week. So that would be a little bit of a concern. GWS got a lot of goals from their midfielders. Whitfield kicked, I think, 3. Canelio kicked 3. Key forwards got involved in the forward line. Toby Green got back to his best. Jesse Hogan had his best performance of the year. It just hasn't happened often enough this season. Look, I'm actually going to go for an upset. I think GWS can back up their performance last week. I do see vulnerability in the Cats. I do think also the Cats could have an absolute feast on that Giants backline, given they weren't really challenged last week, and I think it sort of painted over a few cracks. So, look, I think GWS could potentially get an upset, and I will tip them, but I also am well aware that Geelong are a very mature, experienced side, full of character, and they definitely will bounce back. It's just a matter of whether they get the 4 points or not. We've got Brisbane and the Eagles at the GABBA, and I'm just going to keep this one really quick. Brisbane are winning. Quite simply put, unbelievably good performance against Sydney last week. They had their moments where, it looked like that they were just going to give this one away. They were up by about 4 or 5 goals on a couple of occasions, and the Swans came back, to their credit. But Lachie Neale was just a standout. Daniel McStay kicked this beautiful snap in that period where they looked under siege. And then, you've just got your regular contributors that were all getting on the scoreboard. Cam Rayner had a pretty good one as well. Everyone does their job. It's really the next man up mentality at Brisbane. And despite they've had a few injuries, Joe Danaher's out for a while, they still managed to put up 113 points. So Eric Hipwood, they'll be preying on him to get back, because obviously no standout key forward. They're going to have Darcy Fort and Tom Fullerton as their 2 key forwards. So it's going to be reliant on the small forwards and whatnot to get on the scoreboard, as well as the midfielders. But luckily for them, they've got that key forward personnel against the worst team in the league by an absolute country mile. This team is garbage. Lost by 109 last week. They keep getting players back, but they keep looking shit. So that's basically summing up the Eagles season in a nutshell. They're 1-6. It has been very, very rough. I don't know where the optimism comes from, because there is absolutely nothing to draw upon. I think they've just got to start playing the kids now and just accept that it's probably rebuild time for West Coast. So Brisbane to win very easily. Other night game, and we go from one shit team to another. It is the Bombers taking on the Hawks. And the Bombers, they lost last week by 32. And even though they're not getting flogged, not getting smoked like the Eagles are, they are still on the exact same record as them. And they've basically played like it. They've always been one step behind. They've lost Stringer to another hamstring injury. They're players that they basically need to perform on a weekly basis. It starts in the engine room, and they just haven't been getting enough contributions out of those kinds of players that are on big money as well. The Hawks last week valiantly lost by 10 points to the D's. Mind you, the D's were a little bit depleted. That sends Hawthorn to 3-4. But I'm going to give him credit. Dylan Moore's been an absolute star, and he picked up 33 touches. I don't know where he got him from on the ground, but obviously a forward by trade. So, I mean, if he got 33 touches playing as like a high half forward or something, bloody got to give him a lot of credit, because that's just extremely tough to do. Regardless, Hawthorn do still have some players out, but I think this is going to be an easy win for them. Mind you, it is under the roof of Marvel, and conditions will not matter, so Essendon could give themselves a chance here. Their only win is at Marvel Stadium, so that could be a little silver lining in there. But I think Hawthorn have the personnel to do the job. They've played better as a unit. They've played better individually. And I just think they're going to be too good. 2 Sunday games, and we've got the D's and the Saints first up. The D's won by 10, as we just said. They're 7-0, and the Saints lost disappointingly against Port Adelaide by a point. The D's just look unstoppable. I mean, you take out 15 of their players, they're going to have 15 equally good players coming in and doing their respective jobs. Picked up the 10-point win against Hawthorn, who are no joke this season, so they did well there to pick up the 4 points. And the Saints, well, they could have easily been 6-1. Some late lapses. I mean, you couldn't really say lapses, but the luck didn't really fall their way. And unfortunately, we're on the wrong side of the 1-point loss. I'm not going to take too much out of that loss for St Kilda. Obviously, the 4 goals 18 is a concern, but then you look at Port Adelaide and they were equally inaccurate. So it wasn't just them on that night. But obviously, that is something they really need to work on. It was scrappy. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But 4 goals 18 is just to the extreme. So needed to fix that up. I mean, if they played that one at Marvel, they're winning the game. So, look, I think the D's will win. This is going to be a wonderful contest. St Kilda could easily be one of those sides that decide to rock up against a really tough opponent and give them a run for their money. But I think just generally speaking, on the back of form, on the back of season performances, the D's have not shown any flaws pretty much throughout the whole year. They haven't really shown much vulnerability. So, D's to win. Early Sunday afternoon. And the last game of the round is the Blues taking on the Crows. This one's at 4:40. It is not at 1:10. Sorry for the mistake, but it is a 50-point win that they picked up last week in what was a wonderful game. Probably the most complete 4-quarter performance by the Blues. The Crows lost by 59 points. It was a reality check. They were 3-3. They'd picked up some good wins. They'd beaten the Dogs. They'd been in some good games against Fremantle. I mean, I can't remember the other ones, but we're good enough to be 50% win rate after 6 weeks, which you would have taken at the start of the season. You would have predicted the Crows to be bottom 4 before round 1. But last week they were exposed in a number of ways. Got killed at the contest, got killed in the back line. I think we were actually reminded of that personnel that they have in the back line. Billy Frampton and Jordan Butts. I mean, there's not a lot of games between those two, especially in the back line. So that was always going to be a tough ask to hold those guys down and prevent a lot of goals. Ended up trailing at halftime by about 59 points, and obviously it remained at that. But the damage was done in the first half. Didn't come out of the blocks very well, and the forward line production was pretty shit as well. Blues have to win this one at home. You would think so. Coming off a very good performance last week. Jack Carroll was brilliant in his debut. Very stiff not to get the Rising Star nom. Luckily, the Blues will have Lewis Young for his services this week, given the very questionable report that the MRO deemed as, I don't even know. It was a load of shit. But without him, they would have been in a lot of trouble, because the Crows have a lot of tall timber in the forward line, and the Blues have not a lot of key backs. They are depleted in that area, but I think the Blues will get up. Too much talent. I think they could easily expose the Crows, especially in the guts, like the Giants did last week. The personnel in the midfield is serious. George Hewitt could come back, and I think business will be attended to by the Carlton Footy Club. And those are all the games for this week. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe. Let me know your tips in the comments. and that's going to be it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.